All right, John, we're going to continue the conversation. With me now, former Manhattan prosecutor Jeremy Saland. Jeremy, thank you so much for being here. Opening statements begin. Prosecutors go first. What should we expect from them and the response from the defense?
Absolutely, and the prosecution does not want to overpromise and fail to deliver. And what they need to do, and what I'm sure they will do, is not make this about a salacious, sexy scandal. This is a very straightforward. It is a very straightforward case involving falsifying business records, and it's a very straightforward case that the jury should be able to follow, that this involves the former president trying to circumvent the law when it came to the election. That's what this case is about. It's not about Stormy Daniels per se. It's not about Michael Cohen per se, although they will take the wind out of those sails of the defense so that this is not just on Michael Cohen's shoulders. In fact, we know that David Pecker is going to start things off, so it's far more than that. But they're going to simplify things, the prosecution.
Okay. They're starting with David Pecker, who is the publisher of The Inquirer that made a deal with prosecutors, but was killing stories that were negative against Donald Trump before the 2016 election. Why do you think, or what do you think of the prosecutor's strategy of starting with him?
It makes sense because he's kind of the hub of all of this. He was in the room, if true, with Donald Trump back in 2015. He is part of that formula, that plan of what to kill any bad story, that catch and kill, which involved Stormy Daniels, which involved McDougal, which involved potentially as well this doorman. So this is, if you don't start here, you're kind of coming out fragmented. And he's a strong witness who's also not someone who may be so adversarial like Michael Cohen or Stormy Daniels to the former president. So he's a great place to start by laying that foundation and understanding what's next. How did this evolve? Where did this come from? David Pecker.
This is how they're going to try to link it to the election, because that is why this is a felony, correct? That it was in course of another crime.
Right. So the intent to defraud and making those alterations in the business records and the falsifications, that's that misdemeanor. When you get that felony, well, is there a tax fraud in there? Is there a federal election crime in there? Is there a state election crime in there? Is it a combination of any of those? And again, that all starts with this theme and why we're doing this, because it makes no sense just to kill a story unless there's a reason behind it. That reason behind it is to protect Donald Trump in the election in some capacity. That is a theory and part of the prosecution.
What does the defense do with David Pecker? How do they combat what the prosecutors are going to bring out of him?
Well, you know, David Pecker got a deal, if you will, so he has immunity. He's not going to get prosecuted. And there can be some attacks on that, although it may be awkward a little bit. You know, the attorneys aren't his friend, but Donald Trump and David Pecker have a long-standing relationship. But, you know, listen, there's an advantage to you to do this. Why are you doing this? Because you have a benefit, and you may be able to fudge things a little bit to point things the other way, as opposed to taking blame and responsibility. David Pecker, his company, had $187,000, I think, or so fine from the Federal Election Commission. His hands are unclean, so there's going to be attacks certainly on that level as well.
Can you give me a sense of what the hardest thing for prosecutors will be in this case? Is it about intent, really, in this case?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to establish that Donald Trump really knew, and that's how they're bringing in David Pecker. That's why they're bringing in Michael Cohen. That's why they're bringing in other folks. But it's that second component which people have had a hard time with, which I understand, is falsifying business records is just a misdemeanor, just as a relative term, because no one wants to be convicted of a misdemeanor. But it's how do you get to that next stage and this sort of novel theory of it's a federal election crime that was never charged, a state election crime that was never charged, a tax fraud. So it's convincing that jury, again, to follow the law, to follow what I am saying as the prosecutor. Josh Skyglass, you know, Chris Conroy, let's not make this about sexy, you know, scandalous behavior involving an affair and a former porn star. Take that out. This is just falsifying business records.
You're talking about, but those salacious details are going to come in. You've got Stormy Daniels, you've got Michael Cohen, you've got David Pecker, and you've got Karen McDougal, all on the witness list. I do want to ask you, because this has been something that's been in the back of my head, looking at what happened with Michael Cohen, who was convicted of violating campaign finance laws. And here he will be on the stand. He is one of the main witnesses in this case. Does that work well for the prosecution to say, hey, look, he was convicted of this. He went to jail for this. This is in trying to help Donald Trump do what we're saying he tried to do in this case.
Whatever hand you have is what you have. And what they need to do, as I said before, is take the wind out of the sails of that he's a bad guy and a liar. But what's really important here is if you have a drug dealer who's a kingpin, and I'm not saying Donald Trump is a drug dealing kingpin, but if you have a drug dealer and a kingpin, who knows most about that person? Not someone on the outside, but someone who's immersed in that business, someone who's selling the drugs, who's buying the drugs, who's involved. That is, as ugly as an analogy it is who? Is Michael Cohen. He's immersed, he's hands-on, he's there. So there's a great advantage to have Michael Cohen on your team. You just have to be able to clean him off and say, I get it, he's not the best guy, but that's not what you're here about. You're here if you believe him and he's immersed in it, there's your answer.
And then trying to corroborate that with all the documents and then the other witnesses as well.
Not just his shoulders, it's a lot of other people involved in documents, correct.
All right, we'll be watching this historic trial. Jeremy, Saland, I know you'll be watching every moment.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it.